a thing that comes into it from having read the book a few times. You read the book a few times, and it's just like the resurrection of the Christ.
It's just unbelievable that society can crumble that quickly. It really is unbelievable.
It doesn't take long.
No.
You know, I was born into a Catholic family. I'm very Christian in my beliefs, you know. So I do actually believe this stuff to the full.
The fear of a society collapsing in the blink of an eye, expressed during that conversation between Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson, was not some vague speculation. It was anchored in the conviction of a man who has spent much of his life immersed in ancient stories about humanity's origins, its fall, and its ultimate destiny. When Gibson says he believes these things to the full, he does not sound like someone presenting a theory. There is something in his tone that feels more like a warning, like a man trying to remember something the modern world may have forgotten. And it is that simple nod of agreement that civilization can unravel far more quickly than we imagine, that takes us away from the grand cathedrals of Europe and toward a far more isolated destination, the cliffside monasteries of the Ethiopian highlands, a region often called the Tibet of Africa. In these remote sanctuaries, perched on sheer rock faces and sometimes accessible only by climbing ropes woven from goat skin, Ethiopian Orthodox monks preserved ancient manuscripts for centuries, and among those manuscripts, none has inspired more controversy than the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is not the entire Ethiopian Bible. It is one of the ancient texts preserved within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, while most Jewish and Western Christian traditions eventually left it outside their biblical canon. That difference alone made the book feel like something that had survived on the edge of history. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, this ancient text was cited and taken seriously by influential writers such as Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria. But if the Book of Enoch once held such significance, why is it almost unknown to most Christians today? What happened to a text that was once read, copied, and passed down through generations? Was it simply forgotten by history? Or was there something within its pages that gradually pushed it outside the boundaries of the Western biblical canon? Unlike many familiar religious texts, the Book of Enoch does not portray evil as an abstract force. It brings evil down to earth. In Enoch, corruption begins when the Watchers, heavenly beings who cross the boundary between heaven and humanity, corrupt the human bloodline and teach mankind forbidden knowledge, metalworking, weapons, sorcery, the arts of seduction, the courses of the stars. These gifts did not merely give humanity more power, they carried consequences that humanity itself may never have fully understood. That is what makes Enoch so unsettling. The book is not merely asking how humanity became corrupt. It is asking what happens when a civilization gains power greater than its moral capacity to wield it. And viewed through that lens, the world described in Enoch begins to feel strangely familiar. Today, humanity lives surrounded by tools more powerful than anything previous generations could have imagined. We can create faces that never existed, recreate the voices of the dead, generate conversations that appear conscious despite having no body, no breath, and no life behind them. This does not mean the Book of Enoch predicted artificial intelligence. There is no evidence for that. But as a symbolic warning, it touches the same nerve. It imagines a world where knowledge descends faster than wisdom can rise to meet it. When we examine the forbidden knowledge described in this ancient text, a fascinating interpretation begins to emerge. What ancient people called demons may not necessarily have been horned creatures from mythology. They may have represented disembodied forms of presence, entities that exist only through imitation, haunting, and feeding off human reality. Viewed through a modern lens, the image resembles the concept of simulacra, reflections without breath. They may possess human voices, human faces, and even human expressions through technological simulation. Yet behind the performance lies an absence, no soul, no heartbeat, no life. Today we call them by colder names: simulations, deepfakes, algorithms, artificial intelligence. This does not mean the Book of Enoch directly predicted AI, but it does create a disturbing parallel. Long before screens, servers, and neural networks, the text posed a question that modern civilization is finding increasingly difficult to avoid. What happens when the artificial begins to wear the face of the real, when a voice no longer requires a body, when a face no longer requires a living person? If there is such a thing as an empire of illusion, it may not arrive as an army of machines from the future. It may begin with a glowing screen, a synthetic voice, a face assembled from data, or a perfect answer appearing before a human being has even finished thinking the question. The collapse of physical reality does not necessarily begin with an explosion. It may begin when the line between what is real and what is artificial becomes so blurred that people no longer care to distinguish between them. But if an invisible system can quietly replace the real world around us, where does that process begin? Perhaps the first cracks do not appear in society at all. Perhaps they appear inside the human mind itself, through the layers of perception that ancient texts seem to have warned about long before the age of algorithms ever arrived. What makes the Book of Enoch unsettling is not the fallen angels. It is the gift they brought. Because in Enoch's world, corruption does not begin with war or destruction. It begins when humanity receives a power greater than its ability to control. And if there is one way in which that ancient world resembles our own, it is this. Reality is not replaced from the outside first. It is replaced from within perception itself. In the digital age, that process can be imagined as 3 cognitive fractures. Not distant gates of apocalypse, but 3 layers of defense embedded within human consciousness. The way we see, the way we hear, and ultimately, the way we think. It begins quietly, so quietly that almost nobody notices. The first fracture is the fragmentation of perception. Long before the age of screens, reflections carried a peculiar unease. They resembled reality, but were not reality. A person who stared too long into still water could gradually forget the true form of things. Today, that reflective surface has simply changed shape. It rests in our hands, glowing, moving, endlessly presenting a more attractive version of the world. The digital matrix does not steal your eyes. It does something more subtle. It compresses your entire field of perception into illuminated rectangles. Within that narrow space, artificial intelligence can construct simulations increasingly difficult to distinguish from reality. A face that never existed, a room that was never filmed, a moment that never happened, rendered down to individual strands of hair, particles of dust, and the smallest blink of an eye, yet convincing enough that the retina never has time to object. A political leader can appear to say words he never spoke. A dead actor can seem to return to the screen. A woman can find her own face placed inside a video she never filmed. A war zone can be generated before any camera reaches the ground. The problem is not merely that people see the artificial. The problem is that the artificial begins to look better than the real, smoother, cleaner, more vivid. We increasingly encounter the world, other people, and even ourselves through a lens shaped by recommendation systems and display algorithms. Gradually, physical reality, with its imperfect lighting, tired faces, rough textures, and slower rhythms, begins to fade beside simulations optimized to an almost unnatural degree. That is the first fracture. Once the eyes become accustomed to an edited reality, people no longer need to be forced away from the physical world. They begin to prefer the copy. But the fragmentation of perception is only the outermost layer of the trap. Once the artificial learns how to enter through the eyes, it moves towards something more intimate and more sacred, the evaporation of the voice. Throughout human history, the sound of a voice has always been inseparable from a living being. It emerges from the chest, travels through breath, and carries the subtle vibrations of a human body. A voice is therefore one of humanity's deepest anchors of presence. Yet, before the voice can be detached from the body, language itself must first be detached from contemplation. Writing on physical materials, books, parchment, stone tablets, once forced people to slow down, pause, connect ideas, and sift truth from falsehood through independent reflection. In the digital environment, writing has not disappeared. It has become lighter, faster, more transient. Words flash across the retina in fractions of a second, fragmented, recombined, predicted, and auto-completed, until they no longer demand the same depth of contemplation. And from that transformation, a second Tower of Babel begins to emerge. If the original Tower of Babel divided humanity by making people unable to understand one another, its digital counterpart achieves something more disturbing. It makes language effortless to generate, effortless to duplicate, effortless to counterfeit. We have forged a tongue of silicon and entrusted language to it. That algorithmic tongue can now produce countless answers, synthetic voices, and simulated narratives every day. Given enough data, modern voice cloning systems can reproduce a person's speech patterns with astonishing accuracy, from breathing rhythms and hesitations to the smallest familiar inflections. A son can receive a phone call that sounds exactly like his father asking for help. A grandmother can hear the voice of a child begging for money. The voice says the right name. It trembles in the right place. It pauses in the way only a loved one seems to pause. The danger is not that the voice disappears. The danger is that it appears everywhere, while no longer possessing a clear origin. When a familiar voice reaches you through a glowing device, you no longer possess the same physical certainty that the being on the other end is truly present. First, the eyes are taught to doubt images. Then the ears are taught to doubt presence itself. Humanity enters a new form of loneliness, surrounded by voices, yet increasingly uncertain who or what is speaking. And from the confusion of a creature that can no longer trust its eyes or its ears, the final trap begins to tighten around the last remaining stronghold: borrowed thought. This is the most dangerous stage of the decline, not because people suddenly stop thinking, but because they begin to treat thinking itself as a burden that can be delegated. Ask yourself, when you face a difficult question, a moral dilemma, a piece of writing, or even a personal struggle, and an algorithm delivers a polished answer within seconds, are you truly thinking, or are you borrowing a stream of synthetic consciousness assembled from fragments of countless other minds? When uncertainty, doubt, and self-reflection become inconveniences, the first thing to weaken is not intelligence. It is the capacity to remain with ambiguity, the ability to sit with a question long enough before rushing toward an answer. Some researchers studying memory and technological dependence refer to a related phenomenon as digital amnesia, the tendency to forget information that people believe their devices can remember for them. It does not prove that AI is shrinking the human brain, but it raises a more unsettling question. If memory can be outsourced, can thought be outsourced as well? The concern is not new. In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates recounts an ancient Egyptian fear regarding the invention of writing. Once people entrusted memory to external symbols, they would cease exercising memory from within. And the deeper danger lay in what followed. They would possess not genuine wisdom, but only the illusion of wisdom. They would absorb vast amounts of information without true understanding. They would know many things without truly comprehending them. And eventually they would become confident in borrowed knowledge, mistaking the appearance of wisdom for wisdom itself. Today, that warning returns in a more technologically sophisticated form, no longer carved into stone, no longer written in ink, but appearing as complete answers before a human thought has fully taken shape. The three cognitive fractures close into a single line. First, the screen narrows perception. Then algorithms erode trust in the voice. Finally, artificial intelligence enters the space where human beings once had to think for themselves. The replacement of reality requires no violence, no bloodshed. It only requires people to surrender one layer of perception at a time: their sight, their hearing, and ultimately, their thoughts. But does the process end there? Or is the final objective not the imprisonment of the current generation, those who still remember a world before algorithms? Perhaps all of this is merely preparation for something darker. A generation of children born, raised, and shaped entirely within the matrix itself. A generation with no memory of a world that existed before the algorithm. Once all three cognitive fractures have opened, the trap tightening around reality is no longer a distant possibility. Just look at a 4-year-old child today. This may be the first generation in human history to encounter the world through a glowing pane of glass before fully experiencing it through natural touch. Their first instinctive gesture when facing reality may no longer be reaching for a branch or a stone, but swiping across a screen in search of a skip ad button. For adults, the screen arrived after the world. For children, the screen may arrive before the world has fully formed in memory. That difference is enormous. The algorithmic cage is no longer aimed only at adults, people who still remember a world before screens. It is beginning to target an entirely new generation. Children born, raised, and shaped within a simulated matrix. But to understand the cost of those small fingers swiping across glass, we must leave behind the glow of LED screens and return to the isolated cliffs and remote monasteries of the Ethiopian highlands. For centuries, Ethiopian monks embraced a method of preservation almost opposite to the logic of the digital age: slow, heavy, manual, and deeply tied to physical matter. They made ink from plants and copied ancient texts, including the Book of Enoch, onto rough sheets of calfskin, allowing every word to pass through human hands, human breath, and time itself. While digital information depends upon electricity, servers, and fragile infrastructures hidden behind screens, those manuscripts endure through the very limitations of physical reality. They possess weight, texture, the wear of human hands, the marks left behind by time. That contrast reveals one of the defining cognitive fractures of our era. Adults today still possess what might be called reference memory. We remember a world before algorithms entered every corner of daily life, a world filled with dust, natural textures, sounds that could not be skipped, and questions that had to be carried in silence. We still possess a point of comparison between physical reality and simulation. Future generations may not. For a child raised within algorithmic environments, simulation does not need to defeat reality. It only needs to become the first thing the child learns to call normal. And the physical world, with its dirt, insects, slowness, unpredictability, and limits beyond human control, begins to resemble an outdated version of existence. The trap tightens when that cognitive space is increasingly occupied by virtual caretakers, AI tutors, and personalized educational systems. When a child spends large portions of the day interacting with an algorithmic entity that knows exactly what captures attention, which praise encourages engagement, and which images keep interaction going, a difficult question emerges. Who is planting the first ideas of morality, beauty, and truth into that developing mind? Is it still parents, teachers, books, and the physical world itself? Or is it increasingly a system of code designed to maximize interaction? And this is where the entire trap begins to intersect with a more unsettling curve emerging from Silicon Valley: the technological singularity. In only a few years, things that once belonged to science fiction have entered everyday life. In late 2022, ChatGPT brought conversational AI into public awareness. In 2023, GPT-4 transformed writing, analysis, programming, and reasoning with machines into an ordinary capability. By 2024, generative systems capable of producing images, voices, and videos had begun to challenge forms of sensory evidence that people once considered reliable. By 2025 and 2026, the deeper fear is not that machines suddenly become gods. It is that synthetic media, AI companions, automated tutors, and generated answers become normal enough that people stop noticing how much of daily perception now passes through them. For that reason, 2026 does not need to be viewed as a predetermined doomsday date. It becomes far more unsettling when viewed as a threshold of recognition, a moment when what once existed only as metaphor begins to acquire a tangible shape in everyday life. Algorithms do not need perfect self-awareness to alter how people see, hear, learn, remember, and imagine themselves. They only need to continue becoming the default environment of the next generation. The ultimate consequence of this process is not merely a technological crisis. It resembles a quiet migration of consciousness. The body remains within the biological world, while perception, memory, emotion, and thought increasingly relocate into simulated environments. Perhaps this is what ancient writers attempted to describe through symbolic language: the victory of reflections without breath. And one day, a child raised entirely within the matrix may look out at the physical world. But instead of wanting to enter it, they may find it too slow, too limited, too unappealing. And if a simulated world ever becomes more attractive than the real one for most people, what will still keep humanity anchored to reality? To reach the ancient monastery of Debre Damo, perched atop an isolated cliff in Ethiopia, there is only one way up, a rope made of braided goatskin hanging down from above. For anyone standing beneath that cliff, the climb is not an idea or a metaphor. It is physical. The hands have to close around the rope. The feet have to search for cracks in the rock. The body has to feel its own weight before it can rise. Nothing about the ascent removes the struggle from the person attempting it. That is what makes Debre Damo such a powerful image. The manuscripts preserved in places like this did not survive because they were convenient. They survived because people carried them, copied them, protected them, and placed them somewhere difficult to reach. In a world built increasingly around speed, access, and ease, the journey itself became part of the act of preservation. Debre Damo stands against almost everything the digital world has trained us to expect. The modern system removes friction wherever it can. It gives images without requiring us to look closely, voices without requiring presence, and answers before a question has had time to settle inside the mind. It does not need to conquer by force when it can make the easier path feel natural. So, the path back to reality cannot begin with another machine. It begins with the return of friction, not pain for its own sake, and not the rejection of every tool, but the simple recovery of contact with things that do not instantly reshape themselves around human desire. A tree does not optimize itself for attention. Its bark remains rough. Its leaves move only when the wind moves them. The light across its branches changes slowly, without concern for whether anyone is still watching. A real face is much the same. It is not always clear, flattering, or easy to read. It carries tiredness, hesitation, age, and small movements that no filter can fully erase. To look at such a face is to return the eyes to something less polished, but more alive. This is how perception begins to loosen from the screen. Not through a grand act of rebellion, but through ordinary contact with real distance, real light, real texture, and real imperfection. The eyes have to relearn a world that was never designed to hold attention every second. The same is true of the voice. A voice heard in the same room is never only sound. It carries breath, posture, discomfort, pauses, and the weight of a body trying to say something before it fully knows how. Even silence changes when another person is physically present. It has pressure. It asks for patience. A synthetic voice can imitate tone, reproduce rhythm, and even learn the small cracks that make someone sound familiar, but it cannot carry the presence of a living body. That is the difference the digital world keeps trying to hide. In a world where voices can be copied and scattered everywhere, a real voice in a real room becomes harder to replace than it first appears. A dinner table without phones may seem like a small thing. A conversation that is not recorded, compressed, corrected, or interrupted may seem almost primitive. Yet those ordinary moments protect something that no simulation can fully possess: the shared weight of being physically present with another person. Thought is harder to recover because its loss feels so convenient. A person faces a difficult question, and the answer is already waiting. A paragraph feels unfinished, and the machine can complete it. A sadness appears, and an explanation arrives before the feeling has fully moved through the body. Nothing violent has happened, yet something has quietly been removed. What disappears is the slow inner space where a thought used to form. The uncomfortable silence before understanding has been filled. The old human ability to remain with something unresolved begins to weaken. Not because people have become stupid, but because the world now offers them a way to escape the discomfort of thinking before that discomfort has done its work. To think for oneself is not always noble or beautiful. Often it is awkward, slow, and incomplete. A person circles the same question for days, sometimes years. They misunderstand themselves, they choose badly, they return later with more humility. But that struggle is not a defect in human thought. It is part of what makes thought human. This is why some people have begun moving against the current in small ways. They buy basic phones, return to paper books, write by hand, and meet in rooms where no screen is placed at the center of attention. Most of them are not trying to destroy technology. They still use it. What they are trying to recover is a boundary, a place where the algorithm does not enter first. A feature phone does not offer everything, and that is precisely why it changes the rhythm of a day. A paper notebook cannot autocomplete a sentence, and because it cannot, the hand has to wait for the mind. A walk without headphones does not provide instant stimulation, so the world begins to make its own sounds again. These choices are small, but they restore a form of resistance that begins with attention. No empire falls because one person leaves a phone at home. No corporation trembles because someone reads a printed book under a tree. But the system does lose something in that moment. It loses access. A small piece of attention returns to the body. A small piece of perception returns to the earth. And a small piece of thought is allowed to remain unfinished long enough to become real. That may be the path upstream. It is not an escape from the modern world, but a return to the parts of life that cannot be replaced by a smoother copy. The Matrix can create the image of a forest, but not the smell of damp soil after rain. It can reproduce a human voice, but not the warmth of another person breathing in the same room. It can generate answers, but it cannot live through the confusion, failure, and waiting that give those answers meaning. It reflects life, but it does not live, and perhaps that is the most dangerous part. The Matrix does not need to destroy the real world. It only needs to make the real world feel too slow, too rough, too quiet, and too demanding for people to want to return to it. The goatskin rope at Debre Damo still hangs from the cliff. It does not move toward the person below. It does not lower the mountain. It does not make the climb easier. It simply remains there, rough and silent, waiting for someone willing to climb with their own hands. Perhaps every age has a cliff like that. For us, it may not be a monastery in the Ethiopian highlands. It may be the moment a person turns off the screen and stays with the silence long enough to notice what returns. The earth beneath the body, the breath inside the chest, a face that has not been filtered, a voice that has not been cloned, and a thought that has not been borrowed. That is the primal roughness of reality itself, the one thing no algorithm, no matter how perfect, can ever live on our behalf. If reality becomes less attractive than simulation, will humanity still choose to return to it? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if this story made you question the world around you, follow the channel, subscribe, and stay with us for the next investigation.